Hey everyone! It's been said that every quilt tells a story, and it's so true. But I also believe every quilter has a story to tell. I wanted to hear about the people behind these wonderful quilts and thought you'd enjoy hearing about their lives also. Welcome to A Quilter's Life. I am so thankful that Alice Brown contacted me after I put a post on Facebook looking for people to interview. You'd think that we had known each other for years. We had so much fun visiting. I learned that we should never give up on a UFO, as the perfect situation will arise and surprise you. Alice, thank you for being on The Quilter's Life. I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, I'm very grateful for the invite and for you choosing me. This is something I like to discuss with other people and share. Stronger and more confident as I go through my own processes.
Great. Thanks for that. So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Denver, Colorado, and my father was in the Air Force. When he got out of the Air Force, he worked there for a little while, and then he moved to Silicon Valley. That was the gold rush year when everybody was moving out here and trying to get a good job in the tech industry, which was just, starting out. And I was 5, turning 6 when we moved here. Went to 3 different kindergartens, and that was fun. Still remember them. I don't know why. Very vivid.
Yeah.
And then I lived in Sunnyvale until I was 11, and then moved to San Jose when my parents bought their first home. When I married at 21, I moved it to Fremont, which is sort of an annex of the Silicon Valley. And I had my 2 children. And then their father left about 11 and a half years into the marriage. And the children and I stayed in Fremont so that they could stay in their schools and have, some semblance of order and routine in their lives. After they were grown and out of the house, I moved back to San Jose and bought a condo and, continued my career.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much where I've been. I did sell my condo 2 years ago and moved out to the valley in California. It's called the Valley. It's the Big Valley. That's pretty much my story of travel anyway. Moving.
Yeah. Were you employed during that time?
I was employed as a facility manager. I had always enjoyed working in the facility arena, taking care of corporate buildings and corporate campuses, anything from property management to facility management. The reason I enjoyed it was it had a lot of variety. You never had the same, mundane job day to day. Every day was different. And there was a lot of challenge and a lot of things to learn. You learn something new every day, which is what makes me tick. I have to learn something new every day, even if it's just something small. I thrive on learning.
Uh-huh.
I enjoyed that until I was injured.
Oh, no.
Almost 6 years ago, and I haven't worked since. That last job that I had where I got injured was such a miracle for me because I was in a terrible, terrible job where I had a boss who was just so terrible, just evil. And I just kept praying, Lord, and get me out of this, find me something else. This is not what I like to do. I was, running a security response center. The boss was so nasty, he got me demoted to be a security guard. And, here I was making, $85,000-$90,000 a year, and then I was a security guard at like $12 an hour. And one day I was in a bank building, and I saw a beautiful building across the street. Being a facility manager, you like buildings, you like architecture, you like, for me anyway. And that's another type of quilting. It's the building, right. It's the way it, the light shines or whatever. And I said, I would love to work in that building. And the next thing I knew, they said, we want you to show up at another place today. And it turns out it was that building. And I was so amazed. And that was, really hard building to work in. You had to go and you had to push a button. Like 10 different places you had to be in an hour. You had to do them once an hour, so you weren't just sitting at the front desk sleeping. You had to go and patrol the building. So that was hard. And one day I said out loud to the Lord, I said, why is my life like this? Because that wasn't who I am, Mm-hmm. I had a career, and I was doing well, and then here I was in this deep despair, except my building. And the Lord spoke to me in an audible voice. I mean, I wouldn't say audible that anyone else would hear, but audible to me.
Yeah.
He said, I'm healing you. And I instantly said, why? Meaning, from what? Because it was a shock to hearing his voice to begin with, but to have that be what he said. And he said, just so quietly and so calmly, he said, because I love you. Mm. Oh, I loved that job after that. Just, 2 months more, and I was like every day, oh, good, I get to go to the building where the Lord spoke to me. Mm. I get to have that closeness with him. And part of the architecture was these beautiful glass cathedral ceilings. And I used it as a place of worship. Mm-hmm. And you could do that with no one around, It was great because I had the swing shift or the grave shift. So, yay. And then I got a call from a facility management company, and they said, we'd like to see if you would like this job. And I said, sure, I had a lot of interviews, but nobody really hired me. So I went to have an interview with this guy. He met with me and talked for an hour and a half. He says, let me see what I can do to get you out of your old job. He said, I'll tell you one thing. I usually interview for half an hour, but with you, it has been an hour and a half. And I think you're having a deal here. And he turned in his expense report because he lived out in Fresno, and he met me in San Jose for the interview. And he turned in his, mileage and coffee receipt, whatever. And it went to his boss, who happened to be one of my ex-bosses. And he said, as he wrote on there, interview with Alice Brown. He says, how do you know Alice Brown? He goes, oh, we're interviewing her for a position. He said, oh, you need to hire her. She's awesome. So the Lord had the perfect timing, the perfect place, everything. He said to me during the interview, there'll be this many buildings, and it's on the coast of California, and there are worse buildings in our portfolio. I had 51 buildings before I lost the job due to the injury.
Wow.
And I loved that job because I could go to Capitola and Carmel and Monterey and Santa Cruz. And I was at the beach. And it was wonderful. And it was like that was my gift for trusting the Lord and going through this really hard job. And then was there to heal me and bless me.
Yeah.
And I haven't worked since. And I've, been able to spend a lot more time sewing and quilting and other hobbies. So, but it is an extension of me. Part of being a facility manager is also being a people pleaser. You like your work to show that you care about people.
Yeah.
That's what a quilt does for me. It says, I know who you are, I know what you would like, and I put in this effort and this time and possibly money, most likely, to show you that I care about you and that I want you to be happy with what I've presented to you. And I think that's just another extension of me,
So are there other crafts or hobbies that you do?
Yes. I sew clothes, mostly pajamas for my 4 grandsons. I crochet. I do embroidery. I had done needlepoint and cross-stitch in the past. But cross-stitch has become kind of hard on the eyes, shall we say.
Yeah.
It's not as versatile. You can make a wall plaque. You can put something on a T-shirt. It just doesn't appeal to me as much as it used to.
Yeah.
I do like the crocheting because It's almost mindless. I've done crocheting with, very inexpensive acrylic yarns. I've done rolls. I've done alpaca. I've done some really nice yarns. I've even done some scarves with beading on them, and that's something I've enjoyed because it can really make a beautiful finished product.
Yeah.
I've done some sweaters, but I don't really care for them. I think a knitted sweater is a better look, so I didn't really go too much into that. Just to round out my hobbies, I do enjoy gardening. If you saw my backyard, it looks like a quilt. It has depth, it has layers, it has color, it has design, that sort of thing. I enjoy making my world look like something I created.
How neat.
I like decorating my home. My other hobby is cooking because I enjoy eating, and I enjoy flavors and textures and colors and other quilting,
Yeah.
It seems like everything is so cohesive in my life now. Since I'm, on my own, I don't work, I don't have children, I'm not married. It all sort of melds together and becomes an outflow of my personality, and I enjoy that.
Yeah. So who introduced you to quilting?
I pretty much introduced myself. I saw a beautiful quilt in a magazine, and it just spoke to me. And I wanted to do it so bad. And my brother was getting married, so I said, well, I want to make this for his wedding. And I had never really quilted before. So I cut out all the pieces. They said, buy this much fabric, and here's the templates for the pieces. And I was so excited. And I cut them out, and I was short one piece. There was no way to get around it. So I started over on that one color. And I cut out that color again. I bought extra fabric, and I started over. And it wasn't the choice fabric I wanted, but it worked for the quilt. And time went on, and my kids were born, and, life happened. I had to start a career, and I didn't really get to work on it much. And I gave it to my mom and said, if you'd like to finish it. And she never did anything with it. So I took it back when I was laid off from a job once and looking for work. And I thought, maybe this will give me something to do. And I worked and worked and worked and pieced it all together. And the sad part was there was a ton of material left over, of pieces left over.
Oh.
The pattern was not well written. It did not make sense in any way, shape, or form, and I was very frustrated. And one day I had an epiphany, and I said, you know what? This is going to look like how I want it to look, and it will be beautiful. And I rearranged things to make it work and just took it and flew with it. And I say flew with it because it was called the Dove of Peace.
Oh, neat.
And it was only 2 different shaped pieces. And it came out so beautiful, and I was so pleased with it. But the whole time I was making it, I said to myself, what am I going to do with it? It doesn't match my home. It's not my personality. My brother's been divorced twice, It just wasn't, it was like, where's this going to go?
Yeah.
And my sister said to me, well, maybe one of your friends will be getting married. And I thought that was a funny thing to say. I was in my mid to late 50s. What kind of friends would I have that are getting married, So I had a pastor friend whose wife passed away, and he went off on a little journey to visit friends and try to get, go through grief and all of that. And I met him at a church that I was working at, and then I had lunch with him when he came back from Indiana. He had gone to Indiana on his trip. And he said, I'd like to get together with you. And so we had lunch. And he started telling me he met this woman. And he was going to marry her. And I was just like, what? In the middle of nowhere. So I told him, because I wasn't finished with the quilt yet, I said, I have a surprise for you, but I want to wait until you come back, because he was going to go back to Indiana and then come back again. And then I'll tell you about it. And he says, okay, that's weird. And I said, trust me, It'll be okay. All right. Because that was not how our relationship was. He was a pastor. Why would I let him price for him, you know?
Uh-huh.
And he told me that he was marrying this woman, and I went home and I finished the quilt, and I took it to a long-arm quilter, and I was so pleased with it. It just turned out amazing. It had flight. It had depth. It had the spiritual depth that the better piece would bring, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all in blue and white, and it was just so pretty. I didn't want to keep it. I never felt that close to it because I started out to make it as a gift, so I was glad to give it as a gift. Then I thought at the last minute, just before I gave it to him, I thought, what if his wife does not like blue? So that was a really awful feeling, but because it was blue and white, and I thought, oh no, I don't want to give her something that would be like, oh, what's that, you know? So I looked on her Facebook page, and she had the most beautiful collection of blue glassware in her kitchen.
Oh.
And I thought, oh, that is just perfection. And I was so pleased. And I put it in a nice box. I went out and found a nice, beautiful box that they could use as a keepsake. Put anything they want in, like a treasure box or something.
What a neat idea.
When I give a gift, I like to give a whole package, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
So we met for lunch. I handed him the box, and he opened it up, and he just burst into tears. He was so blown away.
That's so neat.
That is my first and my favorite quilt.
Oh,
and
wow.
that's the one that introduced me to quilting, because I am the kind of person who wants a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it took me, I'm going to just say, 30 years, you know, life happens. That's the one that gives me the most satisfaction and a bit of pride that I finished it and I was able to give it as a gift.
So neat.
My favorite quilting tool, the thing that I use the most, this might sound strange, are my hands and my imagination.
Oh.
That's the part I enjoy most, is touching the fabric and imagining how it will piece together and become a one big, solid, cohesive entity.
Neat.
A finished product. That's the thing that gets me to quilting, is how can I take these bits and pieces and make a beautiful picture, a beautiful design, a beautiful product, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I like those little plastic clips and my seam ripper. The seam ripper slows me down. That's the thing. If I get in a hurry and make a mistake, I say, hey, calm down. And I slowly pick out the thread so that I don't tear up the fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can get back to a better rhythm instead of rushing. So.
Yeah. Do you know about how many quilts you have made?
Probably 15.
Okay.
Most of them have been small for babies, for baby showers. My friends, my sister, my niece, that kind of thing. Yesterday I just made one for my next door neighbor.
Neat.
I kept hearing a newborn cry, and during this pandemic we haven't really been, hanging out.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had a baby. She's 6 months old. So I was bored and sat down and made one out of a kit, but still kind of cute,
Yeah.
And it had a challenge because it had 3 different kinds of fabric. It had minky and flannel and cotton. And that was my challenge, and that was learning to pin quite a bit. I didn't use the plastic clips because I think the pins are less bulky in a small quilt.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, I'm waiting for fabric that I've ordered to make a quilt for my mother. She had a pretty bad stroke a year ago, and I took care of them while she was in this nursing home. I took care of my dad and stayed with him. He can't cook, he can't drive, just basic stuff. Did the laundry, did the dishes, just kept the house going until she could get out. And we moved them to assisted living. Yeah. Well, we moved their furniture, She wanted new furniture. She wanted to plan all this. We said, Mom, you leave here and you go straight to assisted living. We can't buy furniture right now.
Yeah.
She went out and bought a new couch once she was settled in her place, and I told her I would make a quilt for her. So I showed her some, and this is my favorite part of quilting. I auditioned some fabric from my stash because you can't really go out and buy fabric.
Right.
And I showed her one that I was so pleased with. It was so elegant and so her, and I really, really enjoyed it. And then I showed her one with a, a jelly roll, and then a piece of fabric that coordinated or went well with the jelly roll. Mm-hmm. Well, to my surprise, she decided she wanted the piece of fabric that went well with the jelly roll. And I had a fat quarter, and I'm like, oh, no, it's not going to make a quilt. I had no idea. But my challenge was to find the fabric so that I could make, plenty of pieces in the front and maybe use that piece as a back. Mm-hmm. So I went online and I asked, in some of my quilting forums if anybody had any or if they knew how to find some, and I found some. So I bought 3 yards of it. So that was my challenge on that one. The worst thing I don't like to do, I like designing and auditioning fabric. I don't like to clean up after I made something. I just want to keep making, even though there's no room. I just don't like cleaning up and I don't know. It's like I like to cook but don't like to do the dishes, Right. I like the creative outlet. Yeah. And I think my worst quilting experience, even though the first one had some ups and downs, like, wrong amount of fabric, which wasn't in the end, and taking 30 years to do it, that sounds like it can be bad. But another one that I really wanted to do, I started for my grandson, my second grandson, and I wanted to make it something he could use when he got older. He'll be 9 this year, but, he could use as a teenager, as a grown man, or whatever. Yeah. So I got some beautiful fabrics and didn't like them, got some more beautiful fabrics and really enjoyed them, picked the beautiful patterns, and started cutting it out. And you know what he said? I don't want that. Oh, no. And I was crushed because, he's the one I'm teaching to quilt and to sew. He loves the sewing machine. Every time he comes, he says, can I sew? And I just, of course I'll teach him to sew. So I'm kind of like, put that one on hold. Yeah. Especially since while I was cutting some of it out, I cut it wrong. And I thought, I'll fix that later. Because it just didn't have the joy, Yeah. It didn't bring me joy. Mm-hmm. And most of the quilts I make, well, all of them so far, I make for babies of friends and neighbors and family. And, the one I made for the friend. When I moved out of my condo and moved to the valley, I was bored, couldn't go to work because of the injury. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any friends. And my aunt said, well, why don't you join a quilting guild? And I found one that's 3 blocks away from me. I can walk. Wow. It really spoke to me because as a child, I was abused, and I was abused as a wife. That's why I was divorced and a single parent. The quilting guild, once a month on Wednesdays, we get together, and the group is called Warm Wrappings. And we donate our quilts to abused children and abused women. Wow. Battered women. And I thought, well, what more could I want? That brings me so much joy, and the ladies are amazing. Some of them have been quilting for years and years and years, and they just love to share, and that blows me away. Yeah. Some of them are new, and they're older ladies just because they have more time, being retired, and a lot of them are widowed. And I don't fit into that group, but they take me in just like I belong, and it's amazing. They love to share their knowledge. They love to see what everyone's working on. They love to share their finished products. It's just a whole new outlet for my creativity.
What a wonderful group to be part of.
Yes, it's amazing. And then that has helped me connect into my neighborhood, my community, because some of them have lived here all their lives.
Oh, wow.
And they'll say, you could go to this restaurant, you could go to this museum, you know, this is where we go for, you know, repairs, this is the person to talk to for long arms. You know, it's helped me become more at home. And that's how I feel when I'm with them. I feel at home in my person, in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my people. I miss them since we've had the pandemic, but, you know.
Oh, yeah. Why do you make quilts?
Well, just mostly to satisfy my creative urges.
Okay.
I like I said, make something out of nothing and have it become a stunning project, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then to donate to charity, that's fun.
Yeah.
But mostly it seems like it feeds me. It feeds my desire to create and to provide. The warm wrapping thing is just another extension of being able to heal from my past.
Yeah.
So it's a soothing, comforting, creative outlet. And that brings me full circle and keeps my mind off the pain from my injuries, keeps my mind off the what am I going to do next in life. You know, I mean, I'm not old enough to, I am retired, forced retirement, but I'm not old enough to, I don't know, be in retirement, as they say.
Yeah.
This helps me to feel alive and provide something and productive, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. There's more to quilting than just actually quilting.
Yes. It tells a story from your heart if you do it right. And if you enjoy it correctly, if you put yourself into it, it can bring so much to others. Mostly it brings so much to me.
Yeah.
I just finished the top of one last Monday. I turned it over to the long arm quilter Monday. My mother found, or was given, some Farmer Frank's 12-inch blocks. And they were done with flour sacks by her great-grandmother.
Oh, wow.
That would be my great-great-grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And she gave them to my mother, and my mother has kept them in her cedar chest all these years. Mm-hmm. After raising 5 children, after, you know, having, 13, 14 grandchildren, she has great-grandchildren. Now that she's in this home and doesn't have a sewing machine and, you know, has no ability to sew, she handed them to me.
Yeah.
I went crazy. I was blown away. The fabric quality from the flour sacks, it just sent me into like an oblivion. I was like, wow, I want more of this. The texture, the colors, it fed me in a way that other newer fabric doesn't. So I was so pleased. I put this together. I put sashing and, that sort of thing. And I made a piano key border because I wanted to pull in some other old-fashioned looking fabrics. Of course, I didn't really spend much time buying fabric. I wanted to use sash. And then each square had a lot of blank space because the Farmer Franks were, they were in the center of it, but they still looked a little empty to me.
Yeah. So
I went around looking, and I found some really sweet embroidery patterns, like iron-on transfers. It's the only way I know how to do it, So I embroidered something on each of the squares, and that was me adding to the generational quilt.
Oh, cool.
And I tried to match the colors of each design with each of the little Farmer Frank figures, that sort of thing. And they did some pinks and yellows and greens, and it was amazing. I'm going to give it to my third grandson because when I laid the quilt out on the floor in front of the 3 younger grandsons, One of them wanted to walk on it. He's 3. Of course he wants to walk on it.
Yeah.
One didn't even look at it, could care less. The other one laid down on the floor and rubbed his face on it. And you could just tell how much he enjoyed it. And I said, that's the one who's going to get it. So that quilt will span 7 generations once it's finished and gifted.
Oh, cool.
And that's probably going to be my new favorite, you know?
So how long did it take you to embroider on all those blocks?
I would say 6 weeks, because I didn't do it every day, all day. Due to my injuries, it's a little hard. I have a bad shoulder and a bad hip, so sitting and, hunched over all day is not good for the body. So I had to do a sporadic amount of time, but 6 weeks is fine. I had, plenty of other things to keep me occupied.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do it well. I didn't want to rush through it.
Right.
But that just brings me to some tips that I'd like to share, is to take your time and enjoy the process. Enjoy all the processes. There's design, there's fabric choices, there's laying it out on the board and getting it just right if you have different blocks. There's so much that you can do, but that's what I enjoy, and I think it's good to enjoy the process. And another tip is, and I think I pretty much explained why, is to join a guild. Get together with a group of people, like-mindedness. You can have a camaraderie and fellowship, sharing and learning. Just being part of a group that enjoys what you enjoy is amazing.
That's a real good tip.
And then another tip is to remember there are no ugly quilts. Some of my donations, they weren't the prettiest. They weren't the most exciting. But they were not ugly. They were fun. And a child or a battered woman in a shelter would treasure these. And the other thing that I like to do, and I don't know if it's so much as a tip or it's just a preference, is to pray over the quilt. Usually you're making it for someone, so I pray specifically for that person.
Definitely.
What they're going through, what their future, for their academics, for their, future life, their future children, whatever. Just put a blessing on the quilt so that it's a blessing to them. And it helps me to connect with them.
Yeah.
This last quilt from the 7 generations, I spent quite a bit of time praying for that. And this might sound weird, but my great-grandmother was very abusive. My grandmother was terrible. My mother was horrendous. And I tried to break the cycle. And then my daughters, we're all slowly moving away from that. Or not slow, but making great effort to move away from that. But that was my prayer for the next generation, for my grandchildren. My grandson and his children, was the abuse would stop. The joy of your children and your spouse and the life you lead would be prevalent, and that they could be strong. And that's what I chose to make this quilt into, is a covering to cover the pain of the past.
Yeah. How important. It is so, so important.
It is. I didn't understand that I was abused until later in life. And, you marry somebody who's like your mother, you don't know any better, it's comfortable, whatever. But now it's a focus of mine to make boundaries, to not allow abuse. And, with my mother having to be taken out of her home and put into this living, she became extremely abusive, and I fell apart. I thought, okay, we are breaking something here. I felt like I was breaking. But then I noticed I was being broken, but I can be rebuilt. And that's what I have come through in the last 12 months, their journey with them through her stroke and recovery and moving and just, dealing with them.
Yeah.
I've been able to go from having to see them 5 days a week and take them out to buy things that they don't need and, help them around the house because they're mad. They don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And I've been able to go from that to saying, I can no longer do 5 days a week. I can do 2 or 3. To now, with the pandemic, I only do 2. I pick up their laundry and their grocery list.
Mm-hmm.
I drop off their groceries. I bring the laundry back the next day. I visit with them through the window on the patio, away from them with a mask.
Right.
For half an hour, and I get up and go.
Yeah.
And that I have limited my time. And if it gets to be where she wants to be abusive, verbally or whatever, I just tell her it's time for me to go. And I feel like I have this strength. So I think part of that has been just being in prayer over the abuse while making that step. So.
That's so neat because the quilt evidently had a part in your growth there.
Yes.
That was so neat.
And it was brought to me at perfect time in my journey of healing.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with me?
In the beginning of this, I said I like to quilt because I like to have new challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward, I would like to learn how to do paper piecing because it sounds neat. I don't know that it is fun or neat, but it sounds like something to do, exciting. And I would like to learn how to do some of that free motion quilting that looks like it's like a whole cloth quilt. The design is the quilting. That amazes me.
Yeah, I've been noticing that too.
That's something that kind of speaks to me, and I don't know why, but maybe it's this thought of it's no longer in pieces. It's all there and can be beautiful. Maybe that's a healing quilt, finishing up kind of quilt.
Yeah. You probably noticed, or at least I noticed on the whole piece quilt, that almost different heights depending on how far apart the design is made.
It brings depth to the quilt.
Yeah.
And that's what I think intrigues me.
Uh-huh.
Is like the stitching, is the drawing, is the art.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just enjoy it, and it is something that's bringing me out of darkness into light, into comfort and joy.
Yeah.
And that's, I will probably continue this as long as I can, physically. But I would like to pass it on to the one who doesn't want me to make him a quilt because he at least enjoys the sewing machine, At some point he may want his quilt. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll teach him on that one. Maybe I'll bring it out and have him help me make it. That might be an idea.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he might like that. And then he'd be able to say, I helped make this.
Yeah. If he could have some ownership.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be good. I think I will. Well, I really thank you for taking the time to let me share this with you because I really enjoy it. I could talk quilting all day.
Yeah, me too. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed this episode of A Quilter's Life. You can find more stories on thequilterslife.com or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts so each episode will be downloaded automatically. Thanks for listening.